This stream is about to start. We'll talk about code or whatever we'll talk about today. It's about to start, so please hang tight while I check that everything is okay. Sound check, camera check, lights check. How's my hair? Oh, wait, I don't have any hair. Maybe put some pants on and I am good to go. So get ready wherever you are, 'cause this stream is about to start. Get ready wherever you are, 'cause this stream is about to start.
All right, hello everybody. Welcome to a very special stream. We got lots of guests. We got Leandro Facchinetti as always. We got Theo, aka Tail, on the forums. A wonderfully gifted coder whom I missed chatting to last time he was on. And we have Justin Frankel right over, right over here, I think. Yes, this way.
No, that's our cabinet.
Yeah, right over there. You can see that's Justin Frankel. He did the whole thing, the whole Reaper and Winamp. You know him, you love him. He's here. Hi, Justin. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Thanks for being here. It's nice. We're getting lots of people in, so people say hi. If you have questions, ask them on askjf.com because we're gonna be coding and stuff.
If people want to ask questions here, it's fine too. I save me the hassle of having to type out responses. And,
there you go. Perfect. Okay.
Whatever you guys prefer, though, obviously.
Yeah, there's definitely an abundance of questions. Somebody, Mike from Let's Talk About Reaper, said to bring to your attention the Discord server that he's got. So this is me doing that officially.
Okay. I guess actually that leads me to one question that I want to ask you, Justin. You and Cockos as a company are pretty chill. You don't have like advertisements on YouTube trying to sell Reaper. And yet, Reaper, probably everyone here agrees on this, has one of the best communities around. And one of the biggest assets is in the community itself. So how do you build a community, especially probably in the beginning, in the early days, because these days word of mouth pretty much does a great job. But in the early days, how did you build the community around the thing that you were building?
I guess it just sort of happens naturally when you put out a certain vibe into the world and other people. It attracts the like-minded people. And, I think if you do advertise on YouTube, then you bring in people. You don't get that self-selecting group of people ultimately. So I think it probably comes down to that. But I don't know. I wish I could take credit, but I think it's just we've been very fortunate to have such a great group of people who've used and contributed ideas and code in this when it comes to all the JSFX and things like that and extensions, and it's I don't know. If I knew how to do it again, it would that would be interesting, but I don't. So.
And how closely do you keep tabs on what people are doing? I know that you are active on the forum, but do you know what are the latest JSFX that are coming out of the community? Do you follow people who are building on top of Reaper?
Some, but not. I don't necessarily. exhaustively search for new things, that's for sure. But it is good to see new things appear on the forum, and yeah.
Do you ever get surprised that something like,
that,
whoa, I wasn't really expecting that JSFX or REAPER scripts could do that, or that people would try to build such a thing?
I haven't gotten to that point, because I think as JSFX has evolved and new features have been added, and the capabilities of the language have been improved, I've been one of the beneficiaries of being able to write code with it. So it's rare that I see things where I'm like, oh, that shouldn't be possible, because it's ultimately Turing complete or whatever, but there are often things I see where I'm like, that is very impressive and very, a good show of ability and design and taste. And that's always really good to see. Hang
on, you just said something interesting that I want to geek out on. You said that JSFX is Turing complete, is it? I had the impression that it was not, and by design, so that it would never hang.
Nothing is technically Turing complete, because Turing complete implies that you have an infinite amount of memory, and no one has an infinite amount of memory. But
sorry, for those of us who are posers in the coding community,
sure.
What is the Turing complete?
Turing complete is this classic definition of a machine that has an infinite amount of tape, for example, and you can have instructions that go and read a value from the tape or write a value to the tape and then move. And if you have this basic sort of level of functionality, then you can build anything you want on top of that. Assuming the tape is long enough and you have enough time for it to work through the logic, then you can build as complex of a system as possible on top of that basic primitive. And so if you're talking about a programming language, if you have some finite but substantial amount of memory, and you have the ability for flow control and basic logic, then it becomes Turing complete. So JSFX has a limit of like loops can only run 1 million times, but you can also nest them. So you could run a loop of 1 million inside a loop of another 1 million, and then you suddenly have a trillion times. So there are ways around it, but it has these limits that try to help you from hanging yourself by the rope that it gives you.
Yeah, two typical ways of making a language Turing complete is to have recursion, which JSFX do not have, and to have some sort of looping. And JSFX has a sort of looping, but it's bounded. So for the language to be Turing complete, you usually want unbounded looping, and that ultimately boils down to having infinite memory and infinite processing time. But yeah, I thought that it was by design that you put these constraints into the language so that it would make it more user-friendly.
Yeah, the idea is that you shouldn't, if you accidentally write a loop that has, it's while one do something, that it won't let it run forever. It'll at least bail out of that after some amount of time and let you kill it so you don't take down REAPER with it or something like that.
Yeah, I can be proud to say that I have been able to crash REAPER with JSFX. But then you reported and you fixed it in like 1 hour, which was like, oh my God.
Was it on accident or purpose?
Kind of on accident. I was just using an array out of bounds. And then on the M1 processor, there was a check that was using the incorrect instruction.
That was a bug, and that should be fixed at this point. That's it.
Oh, yeah. It was fixed in like 1 hour.
Yeah. Anyway, recursion is not necessary for being Turing complete, but it would be nice. But yeah, we don't support that because it's that gets too complicated, and also just the underlying language would be difficult to implement. So, yeah.
The chat is quickly becoming a feature request. Black market over here. But yeah, it's good. It's good to hear everybody. Oh,
everyone is really passionate about it, so that's good.
Yes, yeah. People want things. I think this is one of the effects of REAPER where like before, like with all the other DAWs, people are like, okay, find a workaround. Like if you need to do something, do the thing. And now people are like, if I can't do the exact thing that I want, the exact way that I want, like fuck this. And it's like, but we only have this level of, like we only get to have this because REAPER is so responsive to the community that it kind of has spoiled all of us. To be like, no, I want it exactly the way I want it and not any other way.
I guess I can ask an umbrella question that is going to cover all of these feature requests at once, which is, of course, you are going to work on things that people ask for sometimes, but also things that you think will make sense in REAPER. But the question is, what is the proportion? How do you prioritize? What is the thought process that goes into this?
There's no real process. I mean, no formal process, and no, I can't really tell you what the proportion would be. I would have, I guess you could go back through every changelog line and think that's feature related and assess whether or not it was something that we wanted for ourselves or something that we wanted because someone requested, or some combination and assign some proportion, and then we could put it in a big spreadsheet and give you a number, but that would be a lot of work. So I don't know the answer to that. But the process is ultimately, we're not gonna, I don't think either, I mean, we should have Schwa on here since he does a lot of seriously huge amount of work when it comes to this sort of thing. But, I think neither of us would do something if we didn't think it had useful value, and whether or not it's useful to us versus we see other people finding it useful, is another question. But so I think anything we do, we're going to see, oh, this is something that would be valuable for people. If it's something that's really important to us and personally, and it's something that's difficult to do, then we might do it. If it's something that's not important to us personally and really difficult to do and creates a lot of trouble, then we're probably not going to do it. But if it's something that's not important to us, but we see it's important to other people and it's a reasonable amount of work and it's not going to create a whole bunch of pain, and we're not going to be latched into it to supporting it forever, then that's the kind of thing that a lot of features end up falling, that category, a lot of features end up falling into. So
speaking of that,
it's a very complex thing that we just have to sort of use our judgment on, and
Oh, cool. Speaking of that, could you give a preview of what might be in the pipeline for new features?
I mean, you can just go look at our development builds, and there you go. If you go to the pre-release forum on our website, obviously, we post everything there, and there's very little that we work on that doesn't end up there, or if it does, it's just for a short amount of time, or maybe a longer amount of time if it's something really complex and painful.
Okay.
But for the most part, everything, if we work on something enough to make it, if it gets to the point of being useful and somewhat reasonable, then it goes into a development build, and so that everyone can mess with it, give us feedback. We can see if issues come up. Occasionally things sit a long time before they end up at that point, but it's not often. And it's usually not that interesting when it's the case. That's usually more like just some big refactor of things that's preventing pain down the line from coming up.
Okay, cool.
And how do you deal with this from...
Oh, sorry, go on.
I was going to ask about this whole topic of features that take a long time to develop. From a technical perspective, how do you deal with this? I suppose that you probably have like feature flags in the code base or compiler macros that take out some portions of the code base as you compile. But as features accumulate, how do you deal with this? How do you manage this?
so we use Git for version control, and then we have branches for particular features that we use, and those branches stick around independent of the releases. And then when they're ready, well, we have a branch that's our development build branch, and then when we're going to do a development build, we merge in all of the feature branches that are ready for that, and then we make a release of development build, not release, but pre-release of those. And then when those branches are ready and mature enough, then we merge them to the main branch, and then that goes into the actual release on the main website.
It seems like a pretty lean process. Is this something that you think you can do because it's such a small development team? And is it one of the reasons why you don't tend to necessarily grow the development team by that much?
I don't know if that's that unusual of a process. I think it's pretty, I would imagine it's something that's used elsewhere. I mean, I think we're probably unique in that we let everyone test our development builds. And I don't think that that's very common. But other than that, as far as growing the development team, I think the bigger factor there is that I don't personally want to manage anyone. And having to review other people's code is there's a lot of value in it, but it's also not the most gratifying thing to do. So I guess it's ultimately a sort of personal selfishness or something like that.
On that topic, I want to ask a question by X Raymond. You probably know him from the forums. He has been writing REAPER scripts for like almost 10 years at this point. And his question is, what is the process like between you and Schwa? Do you sometimes write code together? Do you sometimes overlap in terms of what you're working on? Do you ever code side by side? And I suppose they work remotely for the most part, but what is the collaboration like between you two?
Well, we work remotely exclusively. When we do see each other in person, it's usually something not programming related. It would just be, going for a hike or something like that. As far as what we work on, a lot of times we work on branches independently, and then often have the other sort of review it or contribute. But there ends up being like one person ends up on most branches, one person ends up sort of having ownership of it, just from a responsibility standpoint, not from a what does it mean to own anything, but in terms of like the person who has the bigger picture of what that branch represents in their head.
What is your part of the code base, or one of your parts of the code base?
It doesn't work that way. I mean, it's not really about the code base. It would be about some sort of systems or infrastructure. So, I mean, there'd be like a million different things. Like there was a big overhaul that I did a couple years ago, which was the way delay compensation is applied. And so originally in REAPER, it was like if you had one sample of delay in a plugin, then it would delay by one block of audio. And so if you had two of these plugins in a row, then it would delay by 2 blocks. And so that big overhaul of how delay compensation was done was like a long feature branch that existed for like a year before it ended up in a release. And so that whole system is something that it's still pretty fresh in my brain. So if anything were to come up relating to that, I would probably be the person who would want to deal with it. Things like that. And I guess it has come up because there is a feature branch in the current development releases, which is oversampling for plugins. And thankfully, I did that branch 2 years ago because it made implementing it just so much easier than it would have been otherwise. But as a result, like implementing that, it was like would have been easier for me to do than for Schwa to do.
Which actually maybe brings me to another question that someone asked, but I don't have their name in front of me right now. Sorry for the person that I don't know who it was. But the question is, how much about developing a DAW is about digital signal processing versus other issues like concurrency and dealing with parallel programming and all that thing. But oversampling is, of course, DSP. But I don't think that you are necessarily too deep into DSP itself, right? You are more like into these other spaces.
If you look at REAPER itself, I mean, other than the plugins that it comes with, the only signal processing would be, I mean, sample rate conversion has some tail. I know we've talked so much about that, or Theo, I mean. There's things like for spectral peaks, there's some analysis for doing, all sorts of stuff relating to that. But, there's not really that much DSP. It's pretty much simple things like you pull in audio, you mix it, you apply fades to it. There's not much, there aren't filters in those fades. There aren't, it's pretty straightforward. It becomes just simple. I guess, adding two signals together is technically DSP because they're signals and it's digitally processed, but it's just kind of math and straightforward.
Which brings me to Studio One has a sort of feature where the summing of the channels, you can have plugins for that. So whereas all DAWs, they sum exactly the same. They sum mathematically, but I think it's Harrison and Studio One that has actually you can do processing while it sums, while the tracks sum.
I imagine Universal Audio's DAW does that too.
Okay.
But I don't know. I don't think it matters, to be honest.
Okay. Because that's kind of what analog mixers do. They kind of process the audio that way. So that would be, I have a bunch of feature requests, but that would be one of them.
I wonder, sort of how much it actually matters, and what kind of tests people have done to objectively quantify that.
Analog schmanalog, that's what I say.
Have you guys ever read interviews recently with Steve Albini?
No.
No, not recently.
He's got it pretty. I think he's got it pretty right. Like, he runs a studio that's like all analog and everything, but if you ask him what the importance is, it's like, well, the analog's just there, but it keeps you honest and keeps you doing everything else right, and that's what ultimately really matters. I mean, I'm paraphrasing it down to a sentence, but it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm not dying to have a feature like that. It was sort of more a cool fantasy idea that will be sort of nice to try if it actually did matter. Maybe it doesn't. I don't know.
I mean, I do think the idea of things in life is much better than the reality of them.
Possibly.
So there are very few things that don't meet that.
I'm an old analog guy, so the summing in analog mixers, summing makes a difference, but that's a sort of inaccuracies and idiosyncrasies of the mixers. So digital is way more precise that way. So maybe that's better. If you want an analog sort of idiosyncrasies, that would be a thing to add. But I mean, I can live happily without it. So
it's hard to know the difference between, what if you applied some analog shaping or some distortion, something, whatever it's doing, you apply that to a bunch of signals and then sum them. Is that really going to be different than summing them in some analog fashion? Maybe, but probably there's like 1,000 other things that are going to be way more important.
Exactly. Yeah, doing a better vocal take That would matter way more than
right, or
the actual summing.
Getting your preamps in their sweet spot, things like that.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, it's sort of a fantasy sort of feature. What would it be like? What would it sound like? So, moving on.
There is one question that lots of people are asking, so I'm going to ask you, though I don't personally get what the confusion is, and that is around media lanes. Like, where are they headed? Some people are saying they can't fully wrap their heads around it. So
that we should have had Schwa on, because that's his domain at the moment.
Okay.
But the answer to that is we don't know, and we'll see.
Okay. It's fresh. And somebody's asking a very interesting question. Again, I think I know the answer, but I want to hear your thoughts on it. Since Reaper is so open to various coding scripts, etc., is it possible that malicious code could be passed around? So my personal understanding of this is that, like, you don't get to control everything. You get to control some things that are designated to be, you can select stuff, but you can't say like, oh, take this audio and send it to the, I don't know, to the image process. Well, you can do that actually, but yeah, so can you do that?
Yes. If you install things, it's possible that anything could happen. Yeah. You should definitely want to trust anything that you install in Reaper.
But can I import an action into Reaper and the code inside like messes with my files on my drive?
Yeah, from a rescript, you can pretty much do anything you want. Yeah.
Oh shit. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. So yeah, don't run untrusted.
Don't mess around.
I think that JSFX are pretty safe, because they run in a sandbox, but Lua can access the command line, can write to your file system. It can do a lot. That's a loophole that I sometimes use in my scripts to do, like, call out to FFmpeg and do something. So yeah, I could be calling out to something that does something malicious.
With JSFX, you can make one that you would put on people's monitoring effects and makes them think they have tinnitus. If you really want to fuck with somebody and have access to their Reaper.
Or could, just constantly play some other song in the background.
Just really quiet, and they're like, what is that?
I keep hearing that Kenny Rogers song. What's going on?
Yeah, I guess you can probably create WAV files until the hard drive is full from JSFX.
Right, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
yes. Might take a while, depending on your disk, guys.
Oh, the Reaper blog asks, what is the most annoying misconception about Reaper to you? That is open source? Could that be one?
It doesn't really bother me. I don't know. I mean, I think if you release anything on the internet, you have to be pretty thick-skinned. So, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So misconceptions aren't the things that annoy me. The thing that annoys me most is emails from plugin developers saying, my plugin doesn't work in Reaper, it's your fault. And then, you be like, okay, well, have you tried to actually see why it doesn't work? That sort of thing. But we shouldn't turn this into me complaining about other people.
Well, but on a related topic, there is another person who asks about this. Let me get his name. Bird on Discord asked your thoughts about this new plugin format, and there is some activity by Schwa on this format called Clap. So any thoughts about Clap? Are you looking forward to Clap, or are you like, oh my god, yet another one that I have to support?
Somewhere in between there, I suppose. I mean, the only, I think all formats have their issues. I don't think Clap will be one that does a perfect job of everything, because that's just the way it goes. But it's interesting enough. The fact that VST is not a freely licensed spec is the biggest weakness, and I think Clap solving that is a good thing. But LV2 does a pretty good job. It's admittedly more complex than it needs to be, but I don't know. I don't really care too much one way or the other. It'll be interesting to see, how much adoption it gets, and yeah, we will likely support it when it gets finalized.
We got another question by the Reaper blog. You once showed me crash yes command in the dev module or in the dev console. Are there any other hidden functions? I guess, would they be hidden if you tell us about it?
Let me see. I don't remember. Let me just.
This is, by the way, people watching, this is all warm-up. This is all small talk, as it were. We're talking about the weather. We're going to get coding, I think, soon and do some dirty work, as it were.
Maybe. I don't know. It's kind of what I do all day. So, there's on Windows, you can type TLS avail and FLS avail if you want to see how many TLS and FLS shots or slots there are available, but that's obscure. Everything else seems to be documented, I think. Yeah.
What does crash yes do?
Oh, it crashes.
Oh, okay. There you go. That's very nice.
Just if you want to see how something behaves, like if you're testing, some MIDI devices on Windows won't let go if Reaper crashes. So it's kind of useful to be able to just cause a seg fault.
Yes, XRAM says there's an Easter egg game in the about page of Reaper. Yeah, somebody on the forums brought that to my attention.
There's also, to make that more accessible, you can pull up the about box when you're rendering in order to play the game.
Oh.
I forgot that existed. It existed from the beginning, but I think it's you shift double click in the rendering window and
double click.
I think that's what it was.
Nice.
Are there other Easter eggs in Reaper that, of course, you don't want to reveal what they are, but should we be looking?
I don't remember. I don't think there are any recent ones, so it would be from 15 years ago if there are.
Those are the best ones where the devs are even wait, oh yeah. I think some people found some of those in Portal games and Doom and stuff, where even the devs were oh, that wasn't even meant to be there, or we forgot about it. Fun stuff. Dom is asking, is there an update plan with ReaPlugs and ReaJS? And a side question I'm tacking on, are you in club ReaComp or ReaComp?
The ReaPlugs or ReaPlugs, I'm not sure, yeah.
Okay.
If it is Rea, you have to go very lightly Rea. So it's ReaPlugs. ReaPlug.
Yeah. I try to say it kind of ambiguously, a ReaComp.
ReaComp.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's ReaComp. ReaComp.
Yeah.
I don't know, but
okay.
It's definitely not ReaComp. That's definitely not. But anything else goes, I think. Doing ReaPlugs and the ReaJS. Well, those are two separate questions. ReaPlugs, I think, are kind of a burden to maintain. Anytime we go and we improve them in some way for Reaper, then we have to deal with how does that affect the standalone version. We can't really support them well on Mac OS or on Linux just because of their Windows code, and we have Schwa, which is this layer that translates Windows calls to native in a way, but it's not really designed for standalone plugins. So I don't think we're going to update ReaPlugs anymore. JSFX, we're planning to open source completely. And in doing so, I don't know where the VST version of that will stand, but eventually we'll make it probably an LV2 version. And also anyone could go implement it to however they want, I think.
And if you open source JSFX, that means like, so if you use another DAW, that other DAW like needs to just bring in and support JSFX, and they do an update and then you can use them,
They could,
right?
if they wanted to, when we open source it. I'm not sure what license will do. We may make it LGPL so that if they do that, at least they have to have it as a separate binary so that if you want to extend it, you could extend it, which may or may not go over well. I don't know. I don't know what other developers would do. But also, if you wanted to build it into a VST3 or into a clap plugin or an LV2 plugin, then it would make sense to be able to do that too.
Mm-hmm. Not to stir up some shit, but as you were designing REAPER, were there DAWs where you were like, I definitely don't want to do things the way they're doing them, or DAWs that like gave you lots of inspiration? What was your previous DAW also, for my own curiosity?
Well, I mean, I haven't used, I guess to the extent that I would say that inspiration from what not to do. I definitely tried to use other DAWs that I was like, oh, this is not an enjoyable experience for me. So I didn't look at that of what not to do. It was more just about making something that did make sense to me. And so basically other DAWs that I haven't really used, I haven't really thought about at all for 15 years. What I used immediately before writing REAPER was Sonic Foundry Vegas, later Sony Vegas. And a little bit of Acid Pro, and before that, I used like a Windows version of Logic at one point, but it was very much like stumbling through it and not fully understanding anything of what was happening. Just there's so much that I was just like, oh well, you just fiddle until something works, and then you go with it. It was very much not a logical experience for me.
I see what you did there. I see what you did there.
But Vegas made a lot of sense, though. I think Vegas was very straightforward, and you could just open it up. You could create tracks. You could set inputs on them, start recording stuff, and then the whole editing paradigm of S to split on things and having moving items and having them automatically fade. It was a pretty good time.
Yeah, never used it myself, but never heard a single bad word about Vegas from anybody that I can think of.
Initially, it was sort of limited in that it was for video editing, and audio, but it wasn't like you couldn't do anything with MIDI. And they later added MIDI, but when I was using it, it was just audio. So then you'd go and you'd be like, well, I want to have a drum machine going. You're like, nah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Related to this
topic,
topic,
yourself don't use too much. Oh, sorry. Go on, Leandro.
Yeah. So related to this topic, I have a question from Psyche. You probably know him as the developer of many great JS effects and pushing the boundaries on what you can do with the visuals of JS effects. So Psyche said that he always found it interesting how much your projects allow for customization, and REAPER is definitely a testament of that. So he's wondering about these early days, maybe before you even started working on REAPER, if you enjoyed modifying other software, and what are some examples of pieces of software that you modified?
I don't think I ever really did. I think. I guess programming on the Atari 800 XL and doing BASIC is sort of where I started, but I don't remember modding too much software. I guess some occasional Doom levels that you could download, things like that. But for the most part, I think I was more interested in writing Winamp. Some other people started modding Winamp, and then it was like, oh, well, we should just let people load skins and things like that, so that you wouldn't have to worry about versioning and people sending binaries of executables around, which is not ideal. So, there was that, and then extending Winamp to support plugins and to allow people to go and build things on top of it. That just felt sort of natural. But I wasn't really much of a modder myself.
Are you now? Do you mod REAPER, or the REAPER that we get is just since REAPER?
I mean, I have a few custom actions that I've bound for a lot of the most of the editing that I do, and like templates of projects and things like that. But other than that, it's mostly pretty stock.
I figured from watching your Looper tutorial that this would be the case. Was that one of the things that people kind of forced your hand on, just being able to like themes and stuff, or was it really easy for you to provide features like that?
No, I mean, theming made sense initially because, I mean, especially if you look at the initial versions of REAPER and how they looked, you can see why, doing themes makes sense. So I think that was in there from the beginning. We're pretty close.
Somebody mentioned this, and now I can't stop thinking about it. So you added a feature, and this could be Schwa, that there was a feature to search for synonyms of words, but what non-Americans perceive to be the correct spelling of color, for example, is not one of those things. That would be nice, because I also sometimes, I think I use both. I lived all over the world, so sometimes I say color the American way and sometimes the other way.
Extra use. That is actually, those synonyms are part of the language pack. So you could make a UK language pack, which would provide those.
Well, then saying COLOR, will that then not show up in the search?
Well, you could add it as a synonym both ways.
I see.
But for purpose of actions, you could change the name of the action to be with the U if you wanted to. I suppose we could add that as
that's cool to know.
Yeah.
I think I didn't know the language packs. Never looked into those. We got a Winamp fan here that's saying the renewed Winamp developments. Do you have any idea about where it's going and where it's being taken? Are you involved in that project?
I'm not. I have no idea. They've been saying that great things are coming for a very long time, but I don't know what. I've spoken with the new owners of it, and they are very enthusiastic, but also not terribly prolific, as far as I can tell. So.
Yes, somebody's asking me to open the can of Atmos worms. The Atmos implementation in REAPER, where's that at?
I don't know.
Okay.
I do know that if we do add support for features that enable Atmos, I don't think we will do it in any sort of officially licensed capacity. It'll be just supporting the necessary things without, going through dealing with business deals with Dolby. I don't think is in our future.
I was in the McGill University here in Montreal, and they have a room where they got a 24.2.2 system. So you got 2 rows of speakers arranged around you like a clock, and then you got one below, one above, and then 2 kind of below and on the sides.
Sounds
and
intimidating.
They were using it was kind of crazy. They were using one of their own proprietary software thingamajigs, but they were also using REAPER for it, just real surround. And they had, I think, up to Z speaker, I think, so A, B, C, D, E, I think all the way to the end of the alphabet. So it is like you can kind of hack together some Atmos stuff.
I think we're going to continue to improve the metadata, and possibly, they have some formats for having descriptions of where sounds are and things like that. We may end up supporting those things eventually in a completely independent fashion, I think.
Cool. So there you go, Tormi, and everybody else who asked.
Also, I think, actually, I think at some point someone asked about things that were coming that aren't necessarily, in the development builds. And there is a branch actually that's been sitting around for a year that eventually will end up, and it's for supporting 128 channels per track, which apparently like 3 people will use. So
right, because you can do 64. So, and you can have 264 channels be the children of a further track, or am I misunderstanding? Like, what would that bring to the table?
Well, if you had some VST that had 128 outputs, that would be useful. Now we can't actually deal with that. So, if you had some surround setup that you wanted to have all of these channels on one track. I mean, I'm sort of skeptical of all of this, partly because of the way it would thrash the cache to even have a 128 sample block. 128 samples of 128 channels is what is that? 16,000 samples times 8 bytes a sample, and it's a lot of memory for one block of audio. Anyway.
Yeah.
So,
speaking of,
can I ask a question about this?
Leandro, I'll give you one. I'll ask this just because it's related. Then I'll let you ask a million. So yeah, I've had this argument so many times, and I've given up on it because I'm pretty sure I'm right. And I asked this on your website too. But what Reaper calls block size, which is in preferences device, is the same as what most other DAWs call buffer size, right? And then what is media buffer size? That's for files that are on your hard drive and has no effect on recording.
The media buffer size is yes. So first of all, the buffer size, block size, I'd say those are synonyms. The media buffer size is that when you're pulling in media from disk, like WAV files or MP3s or whatever, it tries to stay a second ahead and have that data ready to go, so that when it goes to mix it, it doesn't have to wait around for the disk. The current setting, it's like a default of 1200 milliseconds or something, is probably a little excessive these days. That was more when you had spinning disks and there was more latency involved. And if in instances where you had a whole lot of media and you didn't want to deal with possibility of underruns there, so.
Yeah, I run into it when I did a few times. I recorded videos with like variable bit rates, but even increasing the buffer size didn't help too much. If you started at the middle, it would sometimes happen. So actually, Leandro helped me by just handbrake and make it a CBR video, and then it runs like a knife through butter.
Yeah, I mean that's a separate issue, I guess. On the video decoding side, is seeking can be really slow, and so that's probably what you're seeing. And the media buffer size probably doesn't help that quite as much. But anyway.
Cool. Okay, Leandro, floor is yours. Sorry for cutting you off.
No problem. It's actually related to what we are talking about. So I wanted to ask to dig a little bit deeper. I'm sure that supporting 64 tracks versus 128, or even things like changing the handling of delay compensation, I am pretty sure it's not just changing a flag that is 64, you change it to 128 and then it works. So I wanted to dig deeper and learn more about what are the challenges that go into these changes that from a user's perspective, it may seem straightforward, but I'm pretty sure it's not.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about 64 channels being the limit of how many channels in a track in Reaper, we use in C or C++, there are different data types, and for integers, the default integer size is, an int of 32 bits or an int 64 of 64 bits. And so at some point, a decision was made to use these int 64 types to use like as a bit mask where each bit represents one channel. And so if you have like a pin mapper on a plugin where you map a channel to a channel of the plugin to a channel of the track channel, then you would, a 1 in that position would mean, oh yes, copy that channel to there, and so on. So updating something to be more than 64 channels involves changing those types to a type that is functionally the same, but more than 64 bits, because you need 128 bits. So had we designed it in a more forward-thinking way, we would have just created a type and abstracted out setting and clearing of individual bits, and then we could have just changed the value from 64 to 128 and changed some other places or whatever, and it would be pretty straightforward. But since we were using this basic type of an int64, we had to actually go and change it from int64s to the new type, doing what we should have done originally, but 10 years is a long time, or however long. So there's that, and then there's a bunch of other places where you just assume, oh, well, the maximum number of channels is 64, so allocate the buffer that's this big, for these temporary pointers or something like that. And so you have to just, make sure that that's replaced with some constant, and then, use that constant instead. So it's not necessarily that much work, but it's also kind of a big pain, and you never know what you're going to break in doing that. And then the trickier part, I guess, is there are places where you serialize state to go into a project file, and you need to make sure that the state can be stored in a compatible way, so that if you if you have less than 64 channels or less, that you still can load it properly in old versions of Reaper, and B, if you have more than 64 channels, can the old version ignore it and also warn the user that it's not going to be compatible, and all of these sort of those corner cases. The easier thing to do would be to say, oh well, here's the new project file format, it's not compatible anymore. But that's no fun. So.
So I suppose that this is the kind of thing that you have to prepare in advance. You have to think that maybe in the future we will change this aspect of the RPP file. So the current version of Reaper has to understand whatever comes its way and warn the user about an update, right?
Ideally, but the reality is that the wisdom that you have today is not the same as the wisdom you had 10 years ago. So you have to figure out ways of pushing the boundaries of what the old version would accept, so that it accepts it in some meaningfully useful capacity while still being extended for the future versions. So there's a lot of sort of, I would say it's sort of like reverse engineering, but it's more like, since you have the source, it's more like figuring out what the boundaries of what the previous version can take are, and how to best sort of manipulate it into taking updated things in a way that's ideal, or good enough, I guess.
Yeah, and related to this, there is this question by Sock Monkey on Discord, and it relates to something that is even on the Reaper landing page, which is how tightly coded Reaper is. Not only the executable that you run to install it, but the executable that you run is actually very slim for everything that Reaper does. So what are some of the tricks that go into making something that is so, first of all, small, but second, that runs so fast, that runs on kind of any machine and runs well enough?
I don't know. I think it's just largely trying to just keep size in consideration, and not having that be a virtue that you strive towards. Because I think a lot of software people just don't care, and they just say, yeah, well, just link in all this stuff and it'll be fine. And so I added OpenGL video output support on Windows recently, and initially I used there's like the what is it Glut or whatever or wait, what's the GL extension manager called? Anyway, OpenGL has all these extensions, and we needed like 3 of them, and there's this library. Oh yeah, it's Glue, GLEW. That's right. So we needed to use these extensions. So you link in Glue, which is this helpful library that handles like all your OpenGL extensions. So you can just use them, and you can check to see if they're available. It works great, but it's like it adds like a half a meg to the program, or maybe even to the installer. It was some substantial amount. Maybe it wasn't a half a meg to the installer, but for 3 functions, we needed 3 extensions. So then, you could also so we used it for a while, and then at some point I just looked and I was like, oh, well, we can just, do what it does, but just for three functions. And then we don't have that dependency. And so, was it necessary for me to do that? No. Would most other software bother? Probably not. But that's just kind of, it's a million of those sort of decisions, or not a million, but 100 of those kinds of decisions, and then suddenly you've saved 10 megs or something.
Somebody wrote the other day that the software for like trackball is like 400 megabytes. I'm comparing that to REAPER. I'm like, there's gotta be like less to the trackball.
What are these people doing?
But some of that's also like, that they decide that they're going to include these big images, or
Right.
like on apps on your phone or whatever, that's like 200 megs for some trivial thing, and you look and it's just like these massive high resolution images and stuff like that. So, but if you don't care, then you don't care, and you just do it. And that's fine.
And is it like a constant priority that you have in mind when
go.
you're developing REAPER? Is it one of the top priorities, or do you prioritize other things like flexibility in the implementation, being able to replace the kinds of values like we just talked about?
I think it's not a top priority, but whenever you do something that substantially increases the size of the installer, you probably find yourself going, is that necessary? Or is that the best way to do that? So, I think it's just having it in your mind and having to be something that you do care about, as opposed to something that you're just completely indifferent to. Because I think most things like your trackball software, the people making that, they don't care. They don't care it's 400 megs. Like, why would they care? It's not their job to care. If it works, it works.
So do you prioritize things like flexibility using abstractions, or do you prioritize writing code that is the fastest it can be, and I suppose the smallest it can be too?
I think it's finding the balance between those things. Worrying about optimization too much is a problem too. I think you could spend way too much time on that. There is such a thing as good enough, and if there's some implementation that is a lot faster but complicates the build environment substantially enough, then it's probably not worth it. An example of that would be, we use Lua for ReScript, and there is Lua JIT or Lua JIT, which is, like 10 times faster, and it compiles to native code. But if we wanted to integrate it into our build environment, it would just be like a huge pain for all the different platforms, because of all of this, generating assembly and all the things it does. You look at the how to integrate into your project for that project, and it's like it's a lot of work, and there would be a lot of things to sort out, and you look at the normal Lua, and it's like, you just put these 15 files in, and then you're done. So that's part of the reason. And also, do Lua ReScripts really need to be that much faster? I don't know. Some people probably say yeah, but usually they're just calling into some REAPER API, and if there's slowness, it's because that thing ends up being some doing some linear search of something that it shouldn't, or something like that. And so there are bigger gains to be made by improving that side of things. And if someone really does care about performance, they can use the EL2 language or something like that.
You mentioned something interesting, the build environment, and I'm also curious about the testing. You said that some things would be difficult to test. So do you have a big suite of automated tests for Reaper, or is it mostly manual tests? And what does the build look like?
We do manual testing of things, but it's not with not with enough structure, and it's something that we have been talking about ways to improve. But for the most part, we test things when they're relevant, and rely largely on users testing pre-release builds to catch the things that we miss.
And for the build, do you reach for off-the-shelf things like, let's say, CMake, or do you have custom tools for that as well?
We don't use any. We have different we have different build systems for different platforms. We're still using Visual Studio 2005 on Windows with ICC 10 or 11, something that's 10 plus years old. And we have some Xcode projects and some make files for Linux. The culling of those for purposes of releases is automated via our own scripts. But we don't, they all have separate things. So it's a little tedious that when you go to add a new file to a project, you have to do it in like 5 places. But it's also like, it just encourages us to shove things into existing files and not create new files when we should. But I think everything works its way into the right place eventually, I think.
How long does Reaper take to build?
It depends entirely on the system, but to do a debug build on a M1 Air, it takes about 40 seconds.
Wow, that's amazing.
Sick.
For all of, and that includes all of the plugins and everything too. But those M1 MacBook Airs are very fast.
We have a question by X-Ray before it disappears up the chat. I've never had this issue where the chat is too long, so this is a great problem to have. X-Ray asks, can we expect more collaboration between Cockos and Voxengo? Because I didn't know this, but apparently that's how the new algorithm for the resampling came about, the right brain.
So one more thought on the last question, which is that the Windows builds with ICC on like an old i7 MacBook or old i7 Mac Mini, which is one of our build farm computers, that takes about 20 minutes to build. So it's 45 seconds is like the ideal scenario, and 20 minutes is like for the release Intel compiler.
45 seconds is what you say on the interview. 20 minutes is what it really takes.
Well, I wanted to be honest, but yeah, but normally you test debug builds, you don't like run release builds. But going back to asking about Voxengo, we'll see. Rate brain free is good, and it has some limitations in how you call it, and in order to do a good quality implementation of it, it took a long time and a lot of thought and some back and forth. But I think so. He's a very smart dude, that Alexei. I think we also use one of his random number generators for the dithering at this point. So.
Oh yeah, the PRV hash.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
But we'll see. If it makes sense and it's easy for us to integrate, sure. And I suppose if we're not violating any sanctions at this point too.
Shit.
I can't. I wouldn't think that would be an issue. But the other side of that though is that he updated Rate Brain Free to some newer version, and and I went to go integrate it, and it relies on some compiler features that aren't available. So it's like, since we use some older compilers, then it's like, well, what do I do here? Like, the old version's fine, the new one's like 5% faster, but is it worth a bunch of trouble and to sort that out? So we'll see if it makes sense. Anything could happen.
It's interesting because you seem to be the person who thinks that if it's not broken, don't fix it, and yet we have new releases of Reaper so often.
Well, we do fix a lot of things that have been broken for eternity. So, there's always things that should be better. And like one of the things that's not yet in a release, but is in the pre-releases is, I play music regularly with some friends, and we'll go play for a couple hours and, record like 10 tracks of Wavepack or whatever. And I'll take it home and build fresh peaks with spectral peaks enabled, and that can take kind of a long time. And so one of the branches is sort of overhauling the peak building so it can use as many cores as you have to do things in parallel, and then also like the spectral peaks calculation is not quite as fast as there were some easy wins there to make it 30% faster, that sort of thing. So having it go from a 10 minutes to build your peaks for a session versus 3 minutes is a pretty nice improvement to have. And it's one of those things that annoys you for years, and then you're like, well, hey, actually, we can make that faster. So.
That would be very welcomed, actually. I was thinking it could maybe do like a video buffering thing where it like makes quickly a very kind of low res version, and then starts kind of building like a higher res version on top of that slowly. So you just have something so like where the, clap is or whatever if you're syncing video audio.
The problem is if you're looking for something that's as short as a clap, you have to look at every sample, or you have to look very often, or you might miss it. So the better thing I think is just if you have 8 cores sitting there, you might as well just use them all to just plow through it.
Very cool. There's lots of questions. If I missed anybody's questions, please let me know. Some of them I'm answering myself if it's something that I know what it is, and if I'm wrong, fight me, please. Most annoying bug to fix, again by X-Rame.
It's hard to quantify or to how do you decide what's annoying? Like the hardest to fix, hardest to diagnose, the one that's the most embarrassing to have in the first place. Like
I'll go with the most embarrassing.
The bug is.
What is the most embarrassing?
Oh yeah, sure, fun story.
Let me just search my Slack for like facepalm or something like that. Let's see here.
We had the 3 times or 6 times spy bug. That was one that I thought was, well.
Yeah. I think I can do better, but I don't know. There have been a lot of them, of things that you're just, where it's hard to remember any particular thing because you just block them out of your mind. But just things that have been wrong for 15 or 16 years, and no one's noticed.
There's your Easter egg.
I wish I had some examples. I should have prepared for this, for the self-deprecation session. But
all bugs are annoying. When I'm doing bug fixing, I'm always like, I can't believe I have to sit here and do this, because just know the thing that I'm doing.
I mean, there are always difficult bugs to find, and then you are always like, they're the bugs that you think you've understood, and then you just are fixing the symptom of it, and the root is somewhere else, and I don't know.
Are there any peekaboos on the code base, like parts of the code base that are like, I wrote this 10 years ago. I hope it doesn't break because I don't want to get in there again?
No, nah. Nice. I mean, they might be there. I just don't know about them. There was some code I rewrote, which was like just managed some linked lists, and it was like a cut and paste of some other code, and it was just all of this completely unnecessary stuff in there. And I was like, oh, this is really like simple, but it had been working for 15 years, and and the compiler probably optimized it to what the ideal code was anyway. Because if you ever look at the output of a modern compiler, it'll realize things that you had no idea about. If you're always checking some pointer against null and it knows that it's null the whole time, then it'll just get rid of all those checks, replace it with just the ideal simple thing. Anyway.
Somebody's asking if you specifically targeted sound designers, because a lot of them are flocking to REAPER, or does that organically happen? Any thoughts on that?
I mean, I think Schwa often says things like, oh, he'll see some group of people and be like, oh, we should do things that are good for them and stuff like that. So there may be some of that, and there may have been things that were done, like supporting all the different wildcard rendering and stuff like that that are helpful for them. Some of that might have predated them, or might have been in response to them. I don't know. I can ask him if you want, but I think he did most of those things. So.
Well, I got REAPER when I got into like game audio and stuff. But what I really appreciated about REAPER was like it wasn't assuming that I'm a musician. It's like you can do music with it, of course, but like you can really do audio with it, and not all the features and not all the new updates are like around like, oh, check out this new face on a sampler, or things that are very specifically like music based. You get a fair amount of everything, so I really appreciate that about REAPER. Doesn't assume.
Ironically, it's I started it because I was like recording music and stuff. But.
Right.
Can you tell us more about this relationship? I know that you just mentioned that you have this music project, and actually this was a question by Daniel Lummertz on Discord. I hope I'm getting your name right, but he wanted to know more about this relationship between being a software developer and a musician, and how one informs the other.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a much better software developer than I am a musician, but I also spend just a vastly massive amount of time programming and debugging compared to how often I play guitar. So, but I mean, I started programming, and then, at some point about 20 something years ago, I started playing music and being interested in that. And as someone who could play poorly, recording was intriguing because you could capture your best moments and not be sort of at the mercy of your average moments. So that's why I think recording was appealing. Though now I think as I have gotten more proficient at playing music, I'm maybe starting to be a little bit like, maybe I don't have to record everything, but it's still a lot of fun, being able to go between those two things. And, the best way to test software that you make is by using it. And being able to do that for the last 15 years has been really, really gratifying, and has sort of kept me very interested.
That's awesome. I think it's one of those things where some people are like, ooh, man, I make my own presets on Serum. And you are like, I make my own DAW when I want to make music. It's really cool. Like,
well, I think anyone who's making anything, I think it's great. I definitely like making things rather than just consuming.
Right.
And you mentioned how you spent a lot of time coding. So what is your I know that you do other things like you run, and what is like your typical day? Do you work on Reaper for like reasonable hours, or are you like the kind of person who is working on Reaper at 3 a.m. in the morning?
As I've gotten older, I have fewer late nights like that. I try to keep somewhat normal hours. But it really varies from day to day. Like some days I won't do very much, or I'll deal with things on the business side of things, or a little bit of things here or there. Or sometimes you get completely burned out and you just don't want to do anything. That happens. But then other days you're like, really get into a particular project and you spend all day and you just sort of yell at everyone around you to leave you alone, and so it really depends on, it varies.
Cool. Should we start talking about code, actual code?
Ooh.
What do you say?
I mean, if it feels too much like work for you, Justin, like feel free to say no. We got questions for days.
I mean, I'm happy to do whatever. I mean, I don't really have too much to say about code. If I guess if you guys wanted to, I would do whatever. If you wanted to see how a particular thing in Reaper worked, I could probably walk you through it in code. It might be really embarrassing and simultaneously boring for you. So, we could do that. We could, if you want to talk about JSFX, the ones that I've made at least, or you want to try to have me figure out what's going on in one of the other ones, you tell me what's interesting to people.
I think Theo and Leandro would have the deeper level questions. I'm sort of learning to code, so I'm happy to. That's why I want to watch people who are good at coding.
I guess then a question would be: is there something that you or a viewer or someone would like to know? How would you go about solving a particular problem, or how would what would the best, or what would a reasonable way of dealing with something be? That sort of question.
Leandro, you know what I'm thinking about? Remember when we were making the interface of the ping pong delay and the ball wasn't bouncing, and then we changed a greater than equals to just equals to, or to just greater than, and then that fixed it? I still think about that all the time.
Yeah, it was probably an off by one mistake.
Okay. That's what immediately came to my mind, but if you have something prepared, we can do it.
I mean, I think that more than looking at how something in particular is done, I guess the greatest insight is to see how you reason about code and how you go about figuring out solutions for problems. So one thing that I think we could do is just briefly go over one of the JSFX that come with Reaper, or if you do have something in the Reaper code base that you think it would be interesting to share, of course, that would be great. But you do have awesome JSFX that come in Reaper, like Super 8 and General Dynamics. So do you have like one piece of this JSFX that you think would be interesting to talk about?
I mean, I don't know what would be interesting, but I would be happy to give it a shot. Schwa is watching this, by the way. He was asking about the embarrassing bugs. He said that there was one from 2006 where we have, well, this is actually funny because there's an option in Reaper to display pan as decibels instead of percentage left and right. And but the issue is that in that mode, it's reversed and it displays it backwards. Though we fixed that recently. But in fixing that, I was like, God, what idiot added this option? This is terrible. Like, who wants to view pan in decibels? And it was me. So I was like totally sure that Schwa had been the one to add it, and but it was me in like 2006 before he even started working on it.
You typed git blame and it said Justin.
What's that?
You typed git blame and it said Justin, or?
Yeah. I mean, it took a while to find it because it was like so many like white space changes and all this stuff. But it was my commit from so long ago.
Git doesn't.
I love that feature. I love that I can do it in decibels. The panning. It's sort of silly but I love it.
Well, sorry that it was reversed for so long.
I got used to it. I was so used to it. I tabbed and then I pressed, and I knew that I knew it by heart. So I just.
And now it's broken for you?
Worked my way around it. Yeah.
It could be a pretty easy JSFX. Oh, they fixed it. There you go. One question, Justin, that so many people asked, I cannot ignore it, and I was wondering too. You may have answered this already in your lifetime a bunch of times. What is it? The bus scenario, hypothetical? I.e., like, if something were to happen to you in Schwa, what happens to REAPER? People are selfish.
I mean, you really want to get morbid about it like that? I don't know. Let's not find out that,
Yeah, no. You look very healthy.
I would, I guess my wife would inherit my shares in the company. So she's pretty. She's a very. She knows what she values the same thing I do. So I think we'd be all right.
That's awesome. There you go, community. No worries. You don't have to sell your REAPER exclusive gear that you bought. Or I don't exactly know where the worry comes from. But yeah, cool. Lots of people wanted to know. So now you do.
Going back to programming things, you said something about the bouncing ball and changing greater than or equal to a greater than. One thing I always like when getting things to work or fixing a bug is I always want to understand the reason why some change happens.
Exactly.
And even if you find something where you're like, oh, I think I understand, but you don't fully, like, it's usually worth sort of just digging in, even if it doesn't matter for the thing that in question. Like, even if you did end up making it correct, knowing why it's correct is really sort of a good thing, a good curiosity to have.
Yeah, like, that issue came about, and I don't know how I knew that the fix is the fix, but then because of that, it's kind of like in my head more than if it was something where, I agree with you basically. Yeah, it's just been bugging me, like, why did that happen?
So if you have that and you want to look at it to figure that out, let me know.
What do you think, Leandro? Do you want to check it out?
Oh, you mean our JSFX with the bug?
The real ping pong delay, not the ping pong delay that people know.
Yeah, do you have that kind of ready to go in terms of, like, do you have the code for this and everything? Because I don't.
Oh, what if I copy paste you the code?
I suppose.
If you have another thing that you want to do, please, let's.
I don't personally, if you're asking me, but
or Leandro.
But I can. Or Leandro.
Or if people want to vote for it in the chat, like vote for, General Dynamics, or you want to vote for
Super 8 has some great gems in there. There are undocumented features in JSFX used in Super 8. So that's kind of fun.
Yeah, I like Super 8 lots, so always down to talk about that.
And it does have some nice user interface that is something that I particularly like. General Dynamics also has some good stuff in there, but I think that Super 8 is even nicer in that aspect. And related to this, I have a question that is actually from Bo. So he's on the call, but I'm going to ask the question, and you can elaborate, Bo, if you want. Sure. Which is, in JSFX, the user interface is the capabilities that come with the language are on purpose by design, kind of bare bones and simple, just some basic vector graphics. And the intent was that people were going to build on that. And you talked about this to some extent with Paul Davies on your talk with him, the creator of Ardor. There is a 2.5 hours long podcast with Justin and Paul for people who are interested. But Bo's question is, do you plan on extending this to maybe allow for things that you were not expecting people would try to do, and now people like Psyche and Justin Johnson, who is doing ReQ, they're pushing the limits of what you can do with the graphics in JSFX. So things like different thicknesses for the lines, and overall just supporting more primitives to enable things that would be maybe too expensive to do in JSFX itself.
Yeah, maybe, but it's also kind of. I mean, I think we had some builds where we did have some thicker line options, but then then you have all the things about, well, you have the line endings, and for different uses, it's hard to really come up with something that is good for everybody. So I think we've kind of held off on that. And then there's the other thing where anytime we add a new feature like that, then someone's going to write a script that won't work with older versions too, and so there's that consideration. So it depends. I mean, if there's something really, really compelling, yeah, but if it's just about making something slightly easier when there are people already have solutions for the existing version, I think it's less appealing of a thing to add. Yeah.
Fair enough.
All right. I come from the graphics world. I've been an art director for my entire life, so I'm having vector graphics would be cool. But then again, like you said, you have to implement them neatly.
Yeah, and and you have to get it right from the start. Otherwise, if we have an implementation that's not great, then people write scripts to it, and then we improve it, and we break old scripts, and
Uh-huh. Yeah. Awesome. So are we doing General Dynamics? Super 8?
Yeah, I wish I could. I was trying to get the Skype to share my desktop, or my screen, but oh, there we go. All right, this might work. All right.
Yeah, it did work.
All right. Amazing. Will people be able to read that, or can you zoom in?
I can zoom in.
How does this work?
I was trying to make everything appear on the screen at the same time, but I can zoom in.
Your IDE kind of has fancy colors, so that's a customization, I guess.
Yeah, there's in the theme tweak configuration window here.
Oh, we got IDE stuff. Oh.
There's, if you scroll down, where is it? Oh yeah, so Rescript JSFX Video IDE. You click that, and then you can load and save files. And then there's a few built-in themes.
Ooh, fun.
Cool.
Some people in the chat are saying the text is too small, Leandro. So maybe you can zoom in a little bit.
I can, but unfortunately there is a limit to what Skype can do in terms of the quality. So yeah, Justin, if you can just command scroll a little bit, that would be great. Thank you.
Let us know if you can't see it. Please let us know.
So this is a JSFX that I made, which what it does is, let me load a different project just to pull it up here. I had this on one of these. So what this does is it maps the, and you can watch Kenny's video about this, or I'm sure other people have them too. It maps the input volume here at the x-axis to the output volume. So it acts as a compressor or gate or expander or whatever you want. And you can just drag lines in it using the mouse, or you can use the command or control key to change the curve. You can hold shift and smooth things out, etc. So you can use it to do all sorts of weird dynamics changes. And it has a bunch of different settings that tweak the standard compressor type things. It's actually not a terribly long script. It looks like it's 470 lines. It has these controls with using the newer named slider as variable syntax, which I'm sure everyone's familiar with.
Yeah,
maybe not.
Is this new?
Well, it's new as in like maybe it's only like 6 or 7 years old or 10 years old, or, something like that. It wasn't in the original JSonic.
Do you still have that piece of hardware that was JSonic? Do you still have it?
I do. Yeah, it doesn't get much use, but it's still at my studio.
And is it running the latest version of JSFX, or is it like the version without the slider names?
It's running a very old version. Though I've contemplated. I mean, it does have some probably gigahertz processor and enough memory. I could probably run Reaper on it. I just haven't gotten around to it.
Cool.
But so the core thing about this is that this plugin creates a table of sort of input volume to output volume, and that is this tab here, which I don't know if you guys can see.
Yeah.
People are saying it looks good. Yeah, looks legible.
Okay. So this table points to 0, which is just a convenient place to put the table, which is at the start of memory, and then we have a size of it, which is 250 entries, and the bottom of it represents negative 108 decibels, and the top 0, which corresponds to this range.
So it looks smooth on the interface, but actually it is 250 steps. That's correct. I haven't looked at this code in a couple of years, so if I say something wrong, we'll find out. So let's just see what the drawing code looks like, so we can understand to make sure I'm not wrong. So here we can right-click, and let's just go to the graphics section. It said thanks tail in the code there.
It said what?
Yeah, up top where you were before, it said thanks tail, didn't it? Did I see it wrong?
Oh yeah. That was the method of detecting whether or not we were on Mac OS, because for the pencil smooth, these labels here, we take advantage of the fact that the rounding of sprintf on Mac OS is slightly different. It rounds 0.5 to 1. Though now I worry that maybe some recent changes we made in Reaper, if that still works, I'll have to check that on Windows. So sprintf with .0 rounds 0.5 up to 1 on what would that be on Windows and on Linux. Anyway, that's fun. That's a good catch there. So back to graphics. So there's the graphics section of JSFX is interesting in that it both draws the UI optionally, it doesn't have to, and it also processes sort of mouse events. So you have that nice mix of both things happening at once, which is not ideal, but you can do anything with it, I suppose. So let's just scroll down here. Here it detects to see if it needs to even update. If it doesn't need to update, then this whole block here, which if I use Command T, matches these parentheses. This whole block here won't even run if nothing meaningful has changed, which is a good way of avoiding extra drawing. So right now, nothing's changing. This code probably isn't even executing, hopefully. So when it draws things, it sets up, clears the background, draws. I guess that's going to be the. Let's just do that. Oh yeah, that's the. Those are the the borders of the axis. So then it does that, and then it draws, figures out the best spacing of grid lines so that they don't get too crowded, and then this is some syntax where the logical OR in JSFX doesn't run the second half if the first half is true. So if it's not in the small mode, which I think it detects earlier to see if it's embedded in a plugin channel, then it won't run the loop that draws the grid lines.
So is there a benefit
labels.
to doing it this way as opposed to using conditional?
Not really. It probably compiles to the same thing if I do small mode equals 0. That. It's just a cuter syntax that kind of goes back to the days of probably Perl or something like that. Why it's that way, I don't know. Just being cute or being difficult, depending on how you look at it. So there's the grid, and then it draws the final. What's this going to be? Oh yeah, one thing is you can zoom in and out with the mouse wheel and move it around with the right mouse button too. What is that? That's the top string, whatever the top string is. Oops, what did I do? Sorry, I'm terrible at this. Oh yeah, that's that same syntax of small mode or. So let's just see what removes here. Yeah, I'm not sure what that's drawing. Anyway, so yeah, I told you this was going to be boring. And we just find, all right, so there's some lines. This looks like it's drawing, I don't know what all this is. It's some stuff. But we're really just looking for the part that accesses tab. So let's just search for tab. That's some UI, like it's modifying tab. And this is what a lot of programming is. It's like figuring out what things you wrote actually do and then searching for them. And then it's still editing tab in this code. It is tab. I don't even know. Maybe I passed it. It's going to be here somewhere, though.
One thing that I'm interested in knowing is we just talked about how most of building a DAW is not necessarily the digital signal processing, but most of the thing that we are looking at is digital signal processing. So when it gets to, I need a filter, I need some flavor of compression, or I need to, I don't know, come up with something that is not necessarily something that you have done in the past, what do you usually reach for? Where do you go searching? Of course, Google, but I mean, what are some resources that you reach to?
Well, I mean, if it's a filter, we have a filter code in all of the different plugins and stuff, so I might look at that, or the stuff that we've written or years ago and have forgotten about. I guess it just depends, if we're doing something FFT based, we have our LinkedIn FFT that's like exported to all the plugins. So all the code uses the same implementation, except for the rate brain, which uses its own implementation. So those sort of things. There's all these readily available resources. The resampling code has its own filters too, and so that might be something. Or a lot of times you need something and you need a filter. It's probably for like doing sample rate conversion, and then so you just use that built-in primitive, and then you don't even have to deal with the details of it. The reason I couldn't find the thing, I think, is that there's this helper function here called gain dB for x, where x is the x coordinate. And so what it does is it actually interpolates between the table of 250, which is used both by the UI and by the actual signal processing. So if we search for that, we'll see that it's used here in the per sample code, where the gain value is calculated, and then it's also used in this drawing code, where the per pixel value is calculated. And so this is implemented by a series of vertical lines or vertical rectangles of 1 pixel, and so for each one, it calls the function for that x value in decibels, and then calculates where that should be on the graph, and then draws it as a vertical line. So you have this primitive of just a very simple table, which is editable by the user directly, and then that same table is converted into, interpolated into a value at any point. And if at the extremes, it uses the extreme value of the table. So if you're below 108, it uses the same gain value, and if you're above 0, it uses the same gain value.
So that means that if you draw a curve and you zoom all the way in, you'll be able to see the steps of the interpolation?
Well, it's linear interpolated, so yeah. So they would be lines. So here I'm doing that. And if we wanted to change the 250, so this is zoomed in as far as we can go as our unit. You can see, let's go in actually just so we can see there's 0 to 3 dB. So we can see it's some fraction. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 steps per decibel, I guess. So if we change this to 500, and then we have to do a full reset for that to take effect, then we can see now it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Or should it have been 14? I don't know. But anyway. Well, I mean, we can easily figure that out. If it's 108 decibels, 500 divided by 108 is, 4.6 steps per decibel or something like that. So anyway. So that's the basic of how this script works, is that it has this table, which is the primitive of gain to volume or volume to gain, and then it just builds a bunch of UI around that, and then what the compressor itself looks like, or the dynamics itself looks like, is pretty simple. It's just it has a different attack and release slope depending on whether, which is used depending on whether or not the current value is above or below it. I think it has an RMS window that rolls so that it can doesn't have to use peak detection, and then applies the gain, and that's about it. And I could go into more detail about how the UI is done if that's interesting, or I don't know what. what you guys.
I'm learning just from watching you using the IDE.
Yeah, this is great.
You're using like short commands and key commands, etc. That I had no idea existed.
So
it's on the bottom.
The one thing that's not on the bottom is Command T, which stands for match, or Control T on Windows and PCs, which will take you to the parentheses that match.
Well, it is on the bottom. It's right there. Pane, find, replace, match.
Oh, it is. Yes. I actually can't read. That's so I just fake it. But no. Anyway, so yeah, so you can use it to find the block that you're in and the matching parentheses, which is pretty handy. Also, I think searching for things is a very common thing for me. I normally use VI for when I'm not using an IDE in REAPER, and that's that makes it very easy too, as to find the things that you're looking for.
Is there a VI mode for the built-in IDE?
There's not. I'm not that. I'm a pretty dedicated VI user, but I'm not that dedicated to actually re-implement it. So that's an interesting thought.
MPL is asking if RS5K will be ported into a JSFX at some point. He's done a lot of cool stuff with RS5K.
I don't know if that would make sense as a JSFX, but it might be interesting to improve the ability to import and dealing with loading media in JSFX.
Actually, I have a question that is related to this. Recently, for instance, you released Real Image, and that was a VSCI, or not VSCI, it was a VSC, it was just not JSFX. Yeah. So how do you decide this is going to be a JSFX, this is not going to be JSFX?
I think relimit. You can ask Schwa about that. I do remember talking about it, but it did seem like it was something that was going to be used enough that it would benefit from running natively at full speed, and I think it just it was a significant enough of a plugin that I think it benefited from it.
But the JSFX
so it's not like we don't want people to know like how we did this, but general dynamics, like have at it. It's not like that.
I don't think we're really terribly secretive about how anything works. I think it's purely a matter of if people are a lot of people are going to use relimit, and they're going to potentially use it in multiple instances of it, then it probably does make sense to just make it native and I think there may have been certain features in it that would be difficult to implement. Maybe from a UI perspective too, it wouldn't be less than ideal. I don't remember the exact rationale. We should ask Schwa there. You can have him on next week.
Hey, if Schwa wants to come here, Schwa, you are more than welcome.
I'm not signing him up for it, but if you work that out amongst yourself,
you write me on the forums or wherever, you all of it, of course. You too, Justin, and you too, Theo. Whenever you want to be on here, just let us know. We'll drop everything else and have you on.
Yeah, I guess I'll stop the screen share now because you were streaming your Slack conversation.
Oops. Wonder if there's anything damning on there. No, maybe.
That was lovely. Yeah. Thank you for that. And I do have another question that's kind of code related. This is from Mespotin, and of course you know her from the forums as well. She's been a part of the community for the longest time. And she asks, like, in terms of features that you implement or even bugs that you try to fix, something that you could or that you still cannot really get to work and that is driving you nuts.
Is there anything that I've failed to get to work that is driving me nuts. Is that the question?
Yeah.
I mean, oops.
Oh,
Sorry.
that's it.
You know, I think that the biggest thing that's been driving me a little bit, it's been giving me a headache, I think, is dealing with the Apple M1 systems, and the fact that we have these asymmetrical cores, and dealing with trying to schedule things on the performance cores, and the implications of when things don't end up there. And so it's kind of, I don't think that the OS's mechanisms for dealing with those asymmetric cores is really well suited for real-time audio. I don't think it's inherent in that, but I think I think there are some sort of issues in the OS that probably need to get sorted out, or documentation that needs to be better, or documentation that I haven't found yet. But that's been kind of frustrating, having these issues and not fully being able to understand what's happening and how to prevent them. And the ways that you can do it do sort of work, but they're kind of a pain, and it's all just, that's frustrating.
Yeah, for people interested in more details, Justin has a write-up on his blog about these issues and the workarounds that he has found for people who want to dive
Some
deeper.
of it is also like my own flailing and failure to find the right documentation too. But also I feel like they should make it easier for people to deal with. But anyway.
Somebody asked a while ago, but I'm curious too, is that the Reaper headquarters that you're in? Could it be?
I guess effectively this is my apartment in New York, which is, I think arguably the headquarters, or at least where I am.
Right.
Since you and
we don't have
Schwa
an
worked
actual-
remotely for, I guess, before even the pandemic didn't really change the workflow
Before it
all
was
that much.
cool.
It didn't really. I mean, it affected us as humans, but not as a company. So.
Ooh, X-Frame asked, do you like Ria comics?
Yeah, it's cute. Yeah, I like it.
I love them.
Have they been out lately? I haven't seen one.
There's a few new ones.
All right.
Oh, somebody's asking voice actions, which I think there's a roundabout way of doing that I know. Voice commands, I'm assuming they're talking about. So saying cut, and then it splits your media.
I haven't looked at what would be involved in that. I mean, I guess there probably are libraries one can use for speech to text and things like that, but that would be an interesting plugin for someone to make.
Yeah, there is a third-party way you can do it, where you give voice commands to this piece of software, and then that piece of software can hear your voice command and press S for you, and then you assign S to whatever you want to do. So you can get it done if you want. Oh, voice attack on Windows. There you go. I just knew there was one. John knows the name.
Yeah, and you can also... The problem with the key is that you have to have the windows in focus, but you could also have some program that listens to the voice command and communicates with Reaper via OSC, MIDI, the web interface. So it can be done.
Yeah, there can also be Windows messages on Windows, or Apple scripts on Mac and things like that, for sending all sorts of things.
Hey, Justin, make my vocal louder, says Kenny.
Speaking of futuristic things like talking to computers, there's this question on Discord by Architect, but the E is a 3, so ArcT3CH. That is about the thing about building software for music makers is that you are sort of shaping what music will be done in the future. So what do you see as the future of music? People are experimenting with machine learning and artificial intelligence, and some people are holding on to the past and doing analog modeling. So what do you think the future looks like for music, and maybe for the industry in general? But what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I'm sure it will continue to get more and more diverse. I think people will go every which way, and you'll have more 70s psychedelia and also very electronic music. I don't know. I mean, I think it'll go as there are more and more people, and we all have access to more and more information and more influence. I think it'll just get more and more interesting.
Yeah, I think when Ableton introduced the OTT thing, all the tracks had OTT on them. So with general dynamics, maybe that'll be a thing where people take the line and just reverse it. So minus infinity is 0 and 0 is minus infinity, and then that would be REAPER core or something.
Wait, what's the OTT thing?
OTT is like a multi-band compression / upward expansion. It has like a very, it brings out all the texture, and everybody was getting into texture, like the kind of crinkle of a snare instead of like the hits, like all that ASMR stuff really comes through if you do upward expansion, downward compression at the same time. Yeah.
The thing you mentioned, how you reverse the curve, is the first thing I did when I found about general dynamics.
Same. Same. I was like, draw anything I want, you say, and then I was like,
I will
reverse. Yeah. I think that's just that's like curiosity. For my level, I was like, oh, I wonder what you can draw with this, and it got really nutty real fast.
Actually, there's another JSFX then that you could have fun with. Completely different, but there's SpectroPaint. Have you used that one?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can just draw on a spectral graph, and then it generates that, and then you can mix it in with things and do your Aphex Twin style messages.
Yeah. I once had some clients that I didn't like, so I did some subliminal that they would never hear. It was for me, and I don't know, maybe somebody will figure out one day that there was a very low volume fuck you in one of their assets. They sucked. I mean, what are you gonna do? And they're not watching this, so jokes on you. I totally incriminated
and we'll
myself.
never watch it in the future either.
No, never. No, it's just impossible. If that happens, please come and take your money back. If you saw this moment of this stream at a later date, I will roll that dice. Those dice, whatever. Yeah. Well, Justin, thank you for being here. We can talk all day. There's so many questions that were asked and not answered, so maybe some more typing for you on askjf.com will be required. But yes, thanks for being here. This was really fun. I mean, I never sat down with the creators of Pro Tools, nor would I want to, even if they offered. Sounds like not a fun time. But this sounds fun. This sounded like fun from the beginning. So thank you for being here. Any final words from Theo, Bo, Leandro?
Yeah,
just a big thanks from me.
Yeah,
this is great.
I guess same here. Thank you very much, because it was from learning about REAPER that I learned about JSFX and about digital signal processing, and it has been so much fun. I've learned so much, and I met great people in the REAPER community. So you are doing awesome work, both in terms of software, but also in terms of the impact that your work has on the world. And that's really something to look up to. So thank you for everything that you do. It has been amazing talking to you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And Yeah.
Come
Makes me
again.
very happy. So, all right.
All right. See you next year or something.
Cool. See you soon.
Yeah.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.